In my opinion, Kansas State is both one of the most underrated and one of the most consistent programs in all of college football. Every year they seemingly have a good quarterback, they always develop talent, have a good defense, and are competitive pretty much no matter what. Ever since Bill Synder took over, K-State has been a really solid program, and while there have been a couple of down seasons, the Wildcats overall have been phenomenal. Many worried that once Bill Synder retired, that K-State would go back to their old losing ways, but it does not look like that is going to be the case. Ever since Chris Klieman came in, K-State has been remarkably consistent, and now they're taking it to the next level. The Wildcats have a chance at winning the Big 12 for a second straight year, something that's never been done in school history, and they could become the elite program in the Big 12 once Oklahoma and Texas leave. In today's video, I want to talk about the rise of K-State. We're going to talk about their dark days, talk about the Bill Synder era, who Chris Klieman is, how he's built K-State, and what their future could look like. But before we get started with that, quickly be sure to leave a like if you're going to support today's video, subscribe if you're new and love college football content, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about the rise of Kansas State football. At some point, I'd like to do a much longer video on the rebuild of Kansas State football, but for the sake of today's video, I more so want to focus on what's happening right now. But we're going to briefly revisit the past where things were really dark. At one point, K-State was actually dubbed Futility U by Sports Illustrated. This was the absolute low point of the program, and apparently there were stories about Kansas State football players not even wanting to wear their jackets around campus because it was such an embarrassment to be a player for the team. They had won 0 games in 1987 and 1988, and had more winless seasons than winning seasons since the end of World War II. Fixing the K-State program would require the perfect coach, and luckily their AD knew exactly who to go get. That coach was Bill Synder. He was the offensive coordinator for Hayden Fry at Iowa, but there was one problem. Synder did not want the Kansas State job. I mean, no one did. After being rebuffed several times over the phone, eventually their AD traveled to Iowa City and literally knocked on Snyder's door. He refused to take no for an answer and walked away with Synder as the next head football coach. Synder would take over and famously proclaim that K-State was going to win a lot of games, and no one believed him. I mean, there really was no reason to. Things would get off to a rough start. 2 weeks after losing to Northern Iowa, K-State would beat North Texas on a last-second touchdown, giving him his first victory. They ended up losing their next 7 games and going 1-10. And while most people saw hopelessness, Synder saw K-State's roadmap to success. He said, quote, "I was encouraged to leave at that time because so many people thought it was a dead-end street. But I was never more convinced because of the improvement that was made throughout the course of that season. It wasn't reflected on the scoreboard, but I knew it was going to be the case." Flash forward a few more years and K-State had become a relevant program. They were consistently going to bowl games, and they were able to compete with the likes of Tom Osborne's Nebraska teams, Bob Stoops' Oklahoma teams, and Mac Brown's Texas Longhorn teams. K-State was a remarkably consistent program. He had built them from nothing into something. From 1996 to 2005, Snyder's Wildcats won over 10 games 6 times and climbed as high as number 6 in the polls on 2 different occasions. Synder had gone 136 and 68, but sadly, he was getting older. He wanted to do something else with life, and he decided to hand it over to their next coach, Ron Prince. Unfortunately, this would be an absolute disaster for the Cats. Going back in time, Ron Prince was from Kansas, but played football at Appalachian State. He quickly rose up the coaching ladder, eventually becoming the offensive line coach at Virginia, before then taking the offensive coordinator job from 2003 to 2005. I'm not necessarily sure what the connection was, but K-State decided to hire him as the full-time head coach. Before that, K-State was sort of trending down, but Prince quickly plunged the program into complete disarray. Despite making a bowl game in Prince's first season, the rest of his tenure was marred by ugly losses, off-field turmoil, and roster mismanagement. They obviously missed a bowl in that second season, and it seems he was very reliant on the junior college world. It may have worked for Synder, but it was not working for Prince. Eventually, they decided enough was enough, and after going 17-20 in 3 years, they fired him as the head coach at Kansas State and bought him out. This was really sad to many K-State fans. 5 years after winning the Big 12, K-State was now on the fast track to being in the dark ages. One fan said, quote, "It completely sucked. Pretty much my entire NFL career, I didn't watch K-State. I didn't do bets with people, I didn't do jersey bets with my teammates, and that was all because I had no confidence in K-State. It just felt awful." By far the lowest point of Prince's tenure was when they got killed 52-21 by Kansas, and from there, K-State would either have to find a new head coach, or they could try and summon Bill Synder back out of retirement. That is exactly what they did. So going into 2009, Synder would return and immediately brought them back to a 6-6 record. From there, he went on a tear. He led them to 8 straight bowl games, and his peak came in 2012 when Colin Klein was at the top of the Heisman polls, and at one point they had a real chance of going to the national championship. Unfortunately, that Baylor loss absolutely stung, but Snyder once again got K-State back to winning, and they were extremely consistent. Between 2009 and 2017, they won at least 9 games 4 different times, and going into 2018, he had decided it was going to be time to retire. It was going to be his final season, and it was both an extremely sad and happy season for K-State football. The Wildcats ended up going 5-7, and it was kind of annoying that they missed the bowl game in his final year, but in total, Bill Synder was an absolute legend. Some argue he's the greatest coach in college football history for what he accomplished, as at K-State, he went 215 and 117. He won nearly 65% of his games, and for a place deemed futility U, that's pretty good. But K-State would once again have to go back to the drawing board. Would they fall into the college football abyss, or would they continue his success? Those were the 2 big questions going around, and their 2019 hire was absolutely crucial. Who did they go out and get? Well, they got a guy who knew how to win football games. His name was Chris Klieman. As I said earlier, Klieman actually played defensive back at Northern Iowa and ended up playing against Bill Synder in Kansas State. After his playing career, he went straight into coaching and was obviously hired by Northern Iowa. In 1997, he became a graduate assistant with Kansas, then went to Missouri State, and settled back in with Northern Iowa in 2006. From there, he coached defensive backs, was the co-defensive coordinator, and also was a big name in recruiting. In 2011, he was poached away by North Dakota State, and he became the defensive backs coach there. For the next 2 seasons in 2012 and 2013, he served under Craig Bull and was the defensive coordinator. After he left for Wyoming, he was made the permanent head coach in 2014, and he saw immense success. While he was there, he went 69-6. This included a nearly perfect 36-4 conference record, 4 national championships, and they spent the majority of his tenure ranked number 1. Every season included 12 or more wins, and he was absolutely insane. He won 6 titles in 7 years, and 37 of his wins came against ranked opponents. While some argued he was just continuing what Craig Bull had built, I somewhat disagree with that. And he also had wins over Power 5 schools, including victories over Iowa State and a ranked Iowa team. From there, K-State's AD decided to make him the head coach, and fun fact, he was at North Dakota State before K-State, so he was more than familiar with Klieman. He said, quote, "I'm very excited to have Chris Klieman lead our program. He's a perfect fit for us, both from a personnel standpoint and as a head coach. He's a tremendous teacher, and I watched him turn into a very successful coach. He will bring a ton of energy and excitement, and his teams play extremely hard and disciplined football. He's a winner, and all he does is win, and I'm excited to have the Klieman family join our K-State family." At the time, the Wildcats chose Klieman over a couple of other big coaches. This included Troy's Neil Brown, Memphis's Mike Norvell, and Oregon defensive coordinator Jim Leavitt. At the time, Klieman was 51 years old and returned to FBS coaching for the first time since 1997. This was obviously coming on the heels of Bill Synder, and Klieman had this to say in his opening statement. Quote, "This is an absolute dream job. I'm so happy and thrilled to follow a legend in Coach Synder, and I followed him from afar and went to his camps while playing in Iowa. I played against his K-State team when I was at Northern Iowa, and the opportunity to follow in an icon's footsteps is something I don't take for granted or take lightly. I know I have huge shoes to fill, and I'm excited to carry on his legacy." So, how would Klieman end up doing at K-State? Well, let's take a look. So going into the 2019 season, it was safe to say the media did not buy the Chris Klieman hype. Kansas State was picked to finish 9th in the Big 12, with only Kansas trailing them. At the time, the Cats were led by quarterback Skylar Thompson, Ball State transfer running back James Gilbert, and their best offensive player was probably Dalton Schoen. They didn't exactly have the most explosive offense, but K-State ended up having a terrific 2019 campaign. They'd end up taking care of Nicholls State in Week 1 and destroyed Bowling Green in Week 2. Their first big game would come on the road against Mississippi State, and Klieman got his first signature win with a road victory over an SEC school, 31-24. The Cats were now ranked number 24 in the country, and the Klieman era was off to a terrific start. Unfortunately, from there though, they got handled by both Oklahoma State and Baylor to drop a 3-2. After that, they'd take care of TCU in a 1-score game before they get one of the biggest wins of the entire Klieman era in a victory over number 5 Oklahoma at home. They would knock off Jalen Hurts and the Sooners, and K-State football was back. They climbed back into the polls and then went ahead and beat Kansas. Except the mode of this team was they could not get over the hump, as they then once again dropped back-to-back games to Texas and West Virginia. To finish the year, they won at Texas Tech and then took care of number 23 Iowa State. And 8-4 was a really solid regular season. They were selected to play in the Liberty Bowl, where they ended up losing to number 23 Navy. Navy's a solid team, but K-State fans were not too happy about that one. Going into 2020, K-State was picked to finish 7th in the Big 12, and they brought in a new defensive coordinator by the name of Joe Klanderman. The Cats once again had Skylar Thompson back, but he would get hurt. Will Howard would have to take over for part of the season, and in that season we saw the rise of Deuce Vaughn. He was an under-recruited running back coming out of Texas, and he became a bright spot for K-State over the next 3 years. Vaughn was the best player on offense, but K-State's first game was awful. They lost at home to Arkansas State, and while this was during the weird 2020 season, this loss was unacceptable. Luckily from there they get it together as they went on the road and knocked off Spencer Rattler and number 3 Oklahoma, and then beat Texas Tech, TCU, and Kansas. The Cats were now 4-1 and ranked as high as number 16 in the country. It looked like Klieman was figuring it out, and if they had just beat Arkansas State, they were a playoff contender. Unfortunately, the season would go south from there. They get blown out on the road against West Virginia, lose a heartbreaker to Oklahoma State, get throttled 45-0 by Iowa State, and then lost by 1 on the road to Baylor. The team was now 4-5, and they ended the season with a 69-31 loss to Texas. After starting out so great, the Cats ended up going 4-6, and many were not thrilled with this. To be fair, it felt like the Cats were set up to fail at the end of the season, but I guess Klieman didn't have enough faith in Howard because they decided to use Thompson's extra year in 2021. Both him and Deuce Vaughn were the 2 main playmakers. In 2021, Kansas State was better. They defeated Stanford in Week 1, beat Southern Illinois in Week 2, and beat Nevada in Week 3. They were off to a 3-0 start and climbed into the polls. Unfortunately, though, they couldn't put it together once again as they went and lost 3 straight games to Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, and Iowa State. They're now 3-3, and they followed the model of pretty much every other season. You win a couple games and lose a couple games. From there, they went on the road and beat Texas Tech, TCU, Kansas, and West Virginia, and those last 3 were all very comfortable wins, but once again, they couldn't finish the season as they lost to number 11 Baylor at home and then lost on the road to Texas. The Cats went 7-5 in the regular season before they would play LSU in the Texas Bowl. In that game, LSU famously didn't even have a quarterback, but K-State didn't care and they won 42-20. This was another 8-win season for Klieman, and while he was doing a solid job, the streakiness needed to end, and it was time to get over the hump. Because of Thompson graduating, they decided to grab Adrian Martinez from Nebraska, as he would add a new layer of mobility to the offense. They also went and got corner Julius Brents, who became one of the top corners in the country, and we saw Deuce Vaughn come back for his final season. On defense, you had first-round pick Felix Azuma, and also one of the top linemen in the country in Cooper Beebe. Combining all those players together, K-State figured it out in 2022. They were picked to finish 5th, but they ended up finishing 1st. They beat South Dakota in Week 1 before they destroyed their old Big 12 rival Missouri in Week 2. As a Mizzou fan, this game was absolutely embarrassing. Unfortunately, though, they would drop a game at home to Tulane, and at the time, this looked really bad. But Tulane ended up being the best Group of 5 team in the country, so at the end of the day, it wasn't a horrible loss. After that, they went on the road to number 6 Oklahoma, and for the 3rd time, Klieman got it done. Adrian Martinez had an incredible game, and they are now back to 3-1. From there, they beat Texas Tech and won by 1 point against Iowa State. They're now as high as number 17 in the country, and they would face off with the Big 12 Cinderella team, TCU. This game ended up being close, but TCU won in the end 38-28, and instead of free-falling, K-State bounced back. They went and blanked number 9 Oklahoma State 48-0, and this was by far the most dominant win of the Chris Klieman era. After that, they lost a tough 1-possession game at home to Texas before going on a winning streak. They went and destroyed Baylor on the road, beat West Virginia handily on the road, and then took care of their rival Kansas at home. Because of this hot streak, they ended up going to the Big 12 championship game, and in a rematch with TCU, they ended up winning. This was one of the most thrilling games of the 2022 season, but after going into overtime, the Wildcats took care of the number 3 Horned Frogs and won the Big 12 championship. This was absolutely massive and got them an opportunity to play in the Sugar Bowl. While they started out solid against Alabama, they ended up getting blown out 45-20, and while that wasn't ideal, it didn't take away from the excitement of the 2022 season. K-State finished 10-4, won the Big 12, and finally put it all together under Klieman. Going into 2023, K-State returned pretty much everyone. Yes, they lost Brents, Felix, and Martinez, but pretty much every other starter returned. But before we talk about the 2023 campaign, we need to meet the important players who have helped build this season and made K-State who they are. The first guy we need to talk about is their quarterback, Will Howard. Coming out of Pennsylvania, Howard was just your average 3-star recruit. While some did see Power 5 potential in him, his offer list was contrary to that. For his entire career at Downington West High School, he threw for over 5,000 yards with 48 touchdowns. While he did win a lot of games, he was only considered a 3-star player. He arrived at Kansas State in 2020, and as I said, got a couple of starts near the end of that season, was a backup in 2021, and also got a couple of starts in 2022. He combined for nearly 3,000 yards and 23 touchdowns in his first 3 years, which is why his breakout 2023 season, he's been a leader for them and has only gotten better as the season has gone on. The second guy I want to talk about is their tight end, Ben Synder. I think he's one of the most underrated players in all of college football, but coming out of Columbus Catholic High School in Iowa, Synder was an absolute beast. He had over 1,000 yards and 22 touchdowns as a tight end, and also had over 100 tackles and 28 tackles for loss as a defensive player. He played baseball, golf, tennis, track, and hockey, and was one of those athletes that did pretty much everything. His cousin was even drafted by the LA Dodgers, and despite having all that success, he was only a 3-star player as well. Synder has really broke onto the scene in 2023, catching 35 passes for over 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. In my opinion, he's one of the best tight ends in the country, and has been crucial for the offense. You also have to mention Phillip Brooks, who's technically the top receiver on the team with 49 catches for 554 yards and 5 touchdowns. But you also have to look at the running back position. Not only do they have Trayshawn Ward, but DJ Giddens has become one of the best backs in the Big 12. Coming out of Junction City High School, Giddens ran for over 2,000 yards and 35 touchdowns during his high school career. While he was a really good player in the state of Kansas, he was also an underrated recruit. He arrived at K-State in 2021 and eventually had a breakout redshirt freshman season with over 500 yards and 6 touchdowns. This year, Giddens leads the team in both categories and has been a crucial part of the offense. While Synder, Brooks, Giddens, and Howard have all been extremely important, you also can't forget their potential top 15 lineman Cooper Beebe and the former quarterback who is rising up the coaching ranks for them. That guy is Colin Klein. After he was an extremely underrated recruit coming out of high school, Colin Klein took over for Kansas State and eventually finished third in the Heisman Trophy race in 2012. At times, it looked like he had won the award, but it fell away at the end. After that, he quickly went up the coaching ranks, was hired by Kansas State, and has only been able to climb up the ladder since. After the Wildcats' Texas Bowl victory in 2021, he was named the full-time offensive coordinator, and Klieman saw coaching potential in him all along. He said, quote, "However that Texas Bowl game turned out, I had made up my mind that Colin was going to be the offensive coordinator, and it was just the icing on the cake that we played as well as we did." Klein right now is seen as one of the top young offensive coaches in college football, and could one day be groomed to be the next head coach there. But putting all these pieces together, K-State's had a breakout 2023 season, and they still have a chance to repeat as Big 12 champions. How has this all happened, and how has the season gone? Well, they were picked to finish second in the Big 12 behind Texas, and even got 14 first-place votes. In Week 1, they would blank Southeastern Missouri State 45-0, and then take care of Troy in Week 2. They were off to a 2-0 start, but everyone had the Missouri game circled. This time, after beating up on Mizzou last year, they would have to travel on the road and play against their old Big 12 rival. That game went back and forth and was one of the best games of the season, but they ended up blowing it. Will Howard was hurt and gave up a 61-yard field goal, and they lost 30-27. This was absolutely heartbreaking for K-State fans, but this team was tough, and they would bounce back. They came back home and destroyed UCF 44-31, and it looked like all was well. Unfortunately, from there they'd have to go on the road and play Oklahoma State on the road, and the Cowboys looked like one of the worst teams in the Big 12 at the time, but they put it all together and won 29-21. This is now a second loss in 3 games for the Wildcats, and everyone had officially hit the panic button. Will Howard had looked horrible in that game, but ever since then, they have played incredible. They first went on the road and beat Texas Tech handily, came home and destroyed TCU 41-3, and then blanked Houston 41-0. They dominated in these 3 straight wins, and K-State was now getting all their momentum back. They're ranked number 23 for their matchup on the road with number 7 Texas, and in that game, they did get down early, but came back. Unfortunately, they ended up botching a short field goal near the end of the game, but luckily they kicked a field goal to force overtime. After Texas kicked a field goal, K-State decided to go for it on 4th and goal, and unfortunately didn't get it. While they ended up losing by 3 to Texas, this was one of the Cats' best performances of the 2023 season, and it should not have taken away from what they were doing. They continued that momentum last week, as they put up a near school record high 59 points in a win over Baylor. In the last 5 contests, K-State could easily be 5-0, and they're playing like one of the best teams in all of college football. Also, those losses to Oklahoma State and Missouri aren't looking as bad anymore, as Mizzou could be a 10-win team, and at one point, Oklahoma State was looking like the best team in the Big 12. For the remainder of the season, they still have to play both Kansas and Iowa State, and this week's road contest against the number 25 Jayhawks is going to be difficult. It's a rivalry, it's on the road, and Kansas is a tough team. And I think K-State's going to win this game, and then also take care of Iowa State at home. That would lead them to a 9-3 regular season, and depending on the tiebreaker, could get them back to the Big 12 championship. This K-State class wants to be the first group to ever win back-to-back Big 12 championships, and that was something that was never done under Snyder, but could be done under Klieman. In my opinion, there's a lot to be excited about. K-State's consistently built a great defense, has done well in the transfer portal, has done significantly well at the quarterback position, and overall, it just seems like Klieman has a good grip on the program and gets the most out of his players. He really gets them to play with a chip on their shoulder, and now, in my opinion, they have potentially the most talented player at quarterback in school history coming up. His name is Avery Johnson, and he was a consistent top 100 player, and chose to stay in-state with the Wildcats instead of going to a blue blood. Avery's already played in a couple of games this year and looks like Colin Klein 2.0. What better coordinator to have to develop him than Colin Klein? And in my eyes, K-State football is going to be consistent and could be near the top of the Big 12 for years to come. Both Oklahoma and Texas are gone, and while I do like the addition of Utah, I think K-State could become the top program in the conference and could be a team fighting for college football playoff appearances. Maybe that's a little bit bold, but I think Klieman is that good. He's won in the past, and K-State's got a terrific system. So far this season has been great, and it could be even better, and now I want to know what you guys think. If you're a K-State fan, what did I get right and wrong in this video? What do you think of this team, and what does the future hold for the Wildcats? Be sure to let me know down below. Leave a like if you want to support today's video. Let me know what player, team topic, or situation I could do next. Subscribe if you're new, and check out all of the videos on the end screen, including how Elijah Drinkwitz rebuilt Mizzou football. I hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.